Okay, let's talk about what I would term the classical conception of beauty. Now, of course, the idealist conceptions that I've been describing do emerge in the classical world, but for example, Plato was quite hostile to the arts of his own era, and I don't think his conception of beauty is what we would associate with classicism in art. For one thing, the emphasis on unity, total unity in Plato and in Plotinus is not really the aesthetic that you see in the great works of classical art. The kinds of views about beauty that I'm going to describe associate beauty with concepts like harmony, proportion, balance, and symmetry, or the relation of unity to variety. Probably the origin of these kinds of conceptions we might trace to the 6th century BC philosopher Pythagoras, famous for the theorem. Pythagoras held that the universe consists of numbers, whatever that means, and that it has its origins in its character in harmony. He talked about the harmony of the spheres, the inaudible music of the heavenly bodies, and so on. The idea probably that originated Pythagoras was that musical harmony could be described mathematically as a series of ratios. We see this famously probably in the idea of the golden ratio and the golden section based on it. I think the golden ratio is 1.618 or something like that, if that helps you. And the ideal human body or the ideal architectural forms are supposed to follow from these sorts of ratios. And we see this developed in the classical architecture of Vitruvius in Rome, Palladio in the Renaissance, Christopher Wren, Thomas Jefferson and his neoclassical architecture, and so on, all very attentive to mathematical ratios and all concentrating on a coordination of distinct parts into a coherent unity. Let me read you a couple of versions of this. One is from Aristotle. Aristotle famously said, by the way, that small people can't be beautiful. Very depressing thought. But he did say this in the Metaphysics. The essential characters composing beauty are order, symmetry, and definiteness. And Francis Hutcheson in the 18th century, early 18th century, in a period of classical revival, gave this definition. What we call the beautiful in objects, to speak in the mathematical style, seems to be a compound ratio of uniformity and variety, so that where the uniformity of bodies is equal, the beauty is as the variety, and where the variety is equal, the beauty is as the uniformity. So, this basic idea of coordination of distinct elements into an overall unity mathematically describable is what we might call the classical conception of beauty. One place you see this is in properly classical music, Mozart, for example, and Haydn, where the structures and harmonies are guided by by basic mathematical relations and ratios, and in which you get a beautiful whole out of a very careful coordination of integral parts. All right. Well, now. One interesting refutation of this view, you get in Edmund Burke in his Enquiry into the Origins of the Ideas of the Beautiful and the Sublime, where he says, you know what, I don't think so. Look at people. or buildings that we find beautiful. Some of them might instantiate these mathematical ratios that you're saying are the essence of beauty, and some might not. In fact, he's sort of said, I've done an informal study of these things, and some of them work out pretty well, and some of them don't at all. And that seems like it's probably right. And in Burke relates the idea of beauty to the idea of love, and he participates in a move toward the subjectification of beauty. I mean, one thing we might notice about both the idealist and what I'm calling the classical conceptions is that they make no reference to the experience of beauty per se, or to a perceiver who perceives or experiences the beauty. So in Plato and Plotinus, the question is whether the object instantiates its form in a very clear way. The degree of unity of the object. Or, as I said with regard to chairs, a beautiful chair is a chair that's very much a chair, that displays the essence of the chair. Like a shaker chair, maybe. But at any rate, that's an intrinsic property of the chair. It's not a matter of how the chair is perceived by anybody. Likewise, in this classical conception, it's a matter of the form, the mathematical ratios, the harmonies, the proportions, and symmetries, and so on. And, if you're a Pythagorean, this relates the form of the object to the form of the universe. And in fact, you might see versions of this kind of idea in ideas about beauty that develop out of the mathematics of fractals, for instance, as well. But it doesn't make reference to the experience of a perceiver. And next we're going to go on to see a set of properly modern conceptions of beauty, starting perhaps with Shaftesbury, but also in Hume and Kant centrally, that make the experience of the perceiver central, or indeed locate beauty not in the object at all, but in the subject, the person experiencing the beauty. So that's next.